Hi, Allison here. I'm just gonna jump right into it, y'all. Okay, so I analyzed the video by itself. I didn't add the teasers or anything from the previous series, The Most Beautiful Moments in Life, or from the actual lyrics of the song. There's so much happening in the video alone that I felt like adding anything else would make this a much longer video. If you haven't read Demian, I would really suggest it. It would really help your understanding of the concept more, but I'll try to explain this the best that I can without referencing the book. First things first, plot. What is happening in this video? So if you haven't already, definitely think of Jin as the main character. We see him in the beginning as looking deeply at a painting where a great battle is taking place. This is already signifying that he has some sort of inner turmoil happening because he's so focused on this painting that he isn't acknowledging anything or anyone else in the room. He's so focused that even J-Hope is like, the fuck? We get several hints towards the world in this music video representing a holding place for Jin's mind and memories. The main point is that Jin is troubled and then begins to reflect on his past and try to gain some idea of how to go about his future. So what parts did the others play? Jungkook is Jin's earliest memory of himself. We can assume he's meant to play the elementary school version of Jin by the way that he swings and is eating candy innocently. Or at least, that's the age I think of because Jungkook is literally a fetus and candy is what I associate with small children anyway. Rat Monster is the first instance where the young Jin has felt compelled to fall into temptation. He offers the green liquid to him and Jungkook takes only a drop into his mouth, but that's all it takes. Jimin is the next version of Jin we see, aged from Jungkook but still curious. We see he and Suga sitting across from one another, and I'm going to talk about symbolism at the end, so I'm going to save this part for later. Jin's eyes are uncovered at the climax, showing an acceptance of knowledge he's gained through his reflection, and he can now more clearly see what he needs to do about his current problem. This is where the story gets weird. Who are J-Hope and V? The better question would be, what are they? J-Hope is Jin's mind, closed off and dark at first, but bursting with color and chaos at the end. We see a moment where J-Hope releases an arrow and splatters colored paint at the silhouette of V. V is representative of the views that Jin is coming to accept, and Jin is using V's image to cope as he falls into deviance and temptation. That's why we see the similar imagery of the wings between V and the statue. If V is the assumed knowledge that is given to Jin, the statue is the personification. That's why it cracks and bursts with so much color at the end. Jin has come to terms and has accepted these new views and this new knowledge as his own. For those of you who stuck around because you're like, prove it. Yo, I got symbolism for days. Okay, so you see in the beginning the pairs I discussed earlier, Jimin and Suga, Jungkook and Rat Monster, and then you see the interaction between J-Hope and V. V is the only one who interacts with the art aside from Jin, and J-Hope only looks at him when V is touching the statue, but only through the Galilean binoculars. Typically, these binoculars are used only when viewing performances or art in order to appreciate it better by magnifying, but also keeping a large range of sight. It's interesting that J-Hope, who we've assumed is Jin's mind, goes from noticing V through the lenses as V represents the new ideals and knowledge Jin is given to Jin and the painting of the battle, further emphasizing that Jin is in turmoil and his mind is now focused on it. It's easy to assume Suga and Rat Monster are the ones giving corruption to the younger versions of Jin, as we typically see them in a smoky room or in a very messy, chaotic looking room. While we're talking about settings and how they can help support my theory, look at the settings where we typically find V. V's settings always look very fake or painted compared to the setting of the rest of the music video, and we even get the imagery of the statue representing V at the end, amplifying his being an illusion. There's also the fact that V in a good majority of his scenes is either shrouded or a silhouette. Keep in mind also, up until the climax, the only person blinding Jin or a younger version of Jin had been Suga. V is the one to cover Jin's eyes and then release him at the end, where he kisses the statue that is the personification of what V represents and puts a crack in his reality. Look now at J-Hope. His room is dark and he's secluded for the entirety of the video, sans the beginning where he is seen observing V and Jin. We can even see where they've cut in the choreography that when J-Hope has a solo, he's either secluded or interacting with V or Jungkook. Not sure if that was on purpose, but it's interesting to see how the mind J-Hope stays close to the innocent version of Jin and these new ideals even in the dancing. We see briefly after Jungkook takes in Rat Monster's temptation where J-Hope finally shoots his arrow, and it ends with color splashing on V's silhouette. This is further exemplifying J-Hope as the mind as he gives free thinking to Jin in the form of V, who is representing these new ideals and knowledge that he was given. If we're looking at Jimin as a younger version of Jin as well, we see him holding an apple after Jungkook has taken his first taste of temptation. This apple fosters the idea of sin and temptation. Suga then blindfolds Jimin and we see him struggle as the blindfold represents new knowledge and ideals given to the younger Jin, but also represents his blindness and his innocence as he struggles to cope with what he's being taught. Looking at it from this perspective, we could also argue that V is not only physically represented in the statue at the end, but also in the blindfold that Suga gives Jimin. We could also easily argue that the most growth happens from Jimin to Jin, as Jungkook is still representing an innocent time in Jin's life where he had only had a small taste of temptation, whereas Jimin, seen as both blindfolded by Suga as well as his sight being blocked by Suga's hand in the beginning, is only allowed to have sight back when Jin has come to terms with his new knowledge. At this point, we see J-Hope's fountain gotten wrapped in color and chaos, signifying that Jin has accepted his new realizations. We also see images of statues cracking and crumbling as his past views have been undermined in this new light. We then see Jin himself cracking at the end, and we can view it as representative of his past beliefs being a flaw that he has to deal with in the future before they become so problematic that he crumbles as well. Just a couple of fun things to point out before I finish. Green. We see quite a bit of green in this video. Green can symbolize growth, so it's interesting to see it the most with Jungkook, and then again as Jimin takes off his blindfold. The last thing I want to point out, because I thought it was kind of cool, if you pay attention in the very last scene, you'll see that there are two different kinds of flowers by the mirror. The lily is on the side where Jin is reflecting, and while oftentimes associated with death, here I'd like to think they represent his past views and innocence. If you look a bit harder, you'll see that it actually reflects the other flower, the speedwells, rather than both being on the same side. These represent fidelity, and I'd like to imagine they represent Jin's fidelity and acceptance of his newfound beliefs. The fact that they reflect one another means that they're both a part of who he is. And that's about it. I wrote a theory as well, where I compared the actual book Demian and the characters from it to the music video because I found it interesting. I was actually bouncing ideas off of a friend because we had both previously read the book, and so it was really interesting what we came up with. I don't mind posting it somewhere if that's something you're into, so leave your own theories in the comments below if you have any. I love reading what other people interpret. If you want more videos like this, I don't mind doing them. So also, if you have suggestions for videos in the future, let me know. All right, bye!